Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for being you, for pressing play on today's episode of Stand Up. I don't think you'll be sorry. I've got a great conversation with legendary comedian, old friend of mine, Steve Hofstetter, who I haven't talked to in a very long time. I think it's an interesting conversation. It's a wonderful conversation, an old friendship. Steve is funny and thoughtful, and it begins at 9 minutes into the show if you want to jump ahead. But before that, of course, I've got your good stuff, as I do every day, your inspiring, thoughtful, hopeful commentary, clips, and more. And I've got your headlines and news coming up as well, the important stuff. That begins at about 28 minutes into the program today. Good stuff, important stuff. Steve Hofstetter all together on today's show, and I'm very happy to have you here joining me for it all. Can't do it without your paid subscription. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Hope to see you at tonight's Hangout. It is Thursday. We made it to Thursday. It's the 12th of December. That means tomorrow will be Friday the 13th. What do you think of that? Ooh, spooky, scary. I don't care. And get your tickets to Pod Jam in March 27th through 30th. Some of your favorite stand-up guests will be joining us for a 3-day experience. Fun-filled. Gonna be awesome. We'll be taping great conversations and having fun, and I hope to see you there. There is a ticket link in the show notes of today and everyday's show. Between now and then, get your tickets now to Pod Jam 2. And without further ado, let's get to today's episode segment of Your Good Stuff. This segment is partially inspired by my friend Dan Harris and his work with 10% Happier, or now I guess it's just called Happier. Anyway, Dan was on the Sherry Shepherd show talking about strategies for managing holiday stress. I find this suggestion so absurd, it might just work.
We get stuck in our heads. We believe our thoughts. Sometimes our thoughts are useful, but sometimes they're toxic and repetitive.
Okay.
And what you want to do to not take them so seriously, one way is to sing them out loud.
All right.
Okay, so I'm going to do this.
Okay, give us
with
an
the
example.
audience.
I love this.
So we're going to sing to the tune of Deck the Halls.
Okay.
And so you guys ready to do this?
Deck the Halls.
So I'm going to sing the beginning part of it, and then you're going to say, it's okay this holiday.
Okay.
All right. Ate too much and pants aren't fitting.
It's okay this holiday.
Ham is burnt and baby's crying.
It's okay this holiday. Family's asking me for more money. It's okay this holiday. Kravitz won't return my phone calls. It's okay this holiday. Oh, I like that. It made me laugh.
Those sounded very personal.
They were very, very personal. I just wanted to see if it would work, and it did.
All right, there you go. Little advice from Dan Harris with Sherry Shepherd. It's ridiculous, but maybe it'll work. I don't know. I'll give it a shot. And speaking of Dan Harris, I also saw this and thought it was good. He's talking about dealing with loneliness during the holidays.
Loneliness. This can really spike during the holidays. If you're looking at Instagram, it may seem like everybody else is having a great time and you're on your own. Loneliness is a public health disaster. The data on this are pretty clear. Loneliness has gotten worse over time. And so we need strategies for dealing with it. So I'm going to give you two. The first comes from Dr. Vivek Murthy, who's the Surgeon General. One of his big suggestions for loneliness is to volunteer. Volunteering is a great way to meet other people. Volunteering is a great way to remind yourself of your innate worth. The other recommendation for loneliness, it's quite similar to loving kindness meditation. This practice is known as karuna, which translates to compassion. And here's how it goes. Close your eyes and then just envision a series of people who are struggling right now. People from your life or even people from the news. And then silently send them phrases such as, may you be free from pain, may you be free from fear, may you be free from sorrow. And then I like to finish with, may you be free from suffering. And just work through as many people as you can muster. For me, it just pulls me out of myself in a helpful way. And the second thing it does is, for me at least, it provokes gratitude. Because as bad as I might be feeling about something in my own life, things are always worse for somebody else. So try these two strategies for loneliness, which, again, is at unprecedented levels right now.
There you go, Dan Harris with some more great advice. But let's get to the legend, Nikki Giovanni. Yesterday, we learned of her passing and a lot about her life. And also, I should have mentioned at the opening, last night I sat down with the ladies from The Hue, all of who had something really important and profoundly impactful to say about her role that she had in their lives. So I'll be posting that interview within the next couple days as well. But I thought this clip was pretty great. Maybe I'll get to a couple. Here's Nikki Giovanni on the importance of self-love. Try to ignore the music that comes up at the end.
I just think it's so important. And I say this as a grandmother, as an older woman here, and I do recommend Old Age. I really love it. That you like yourself. And what worries me about your generation is that most of you don't.
Yeah.
Most of you are not fond of. You don't, when you wake up in the morning, and I laugh at my students about that, and you're brushing your teeth, the first thing you have to say is, I love you. Because it may be the only time you hear I love you in the day. Say it to yourself. The first thing you do is smile to yourself.
Yeah, I love it very much. Good advice from Nikki Giovanni, and I'm going to be looking to her for more. The ladies suggested that we watch the interview that she did years ago with James Baldwin, like 30 years ago, more than that. And I started watching it last night. Already very fascinating. Nikki Giovanni, James Baldwin, look it up. Real good stuff on that. Another teacher I've gone to over and over the years who is a great writer is a guy named Jack Kornfield. He is a Buddhist monk and a teacher, studied with the greatest. He's taught mindfulness meditation worldwide since before I was born. And here he is explaining very quickly the Four Noble Truths of Buddhism in under about 90 seconds.
It turns out that if you read and study the Buddhist teachings, the most fundamental teachings of the Four Noble Truths, what you understand is that suffering, which is the first noble truth, that life has suffering, not that life is suffering, because it's magnificent and unbearably beautiful. And it has suffering. Anybody not have suffering, you can, sign off now and I wish you well and tell us how it is. But it has suffering. But that is only the first noble truth. It's not the end of the story. There are causes for suffering among humanity: greed, hatred, ignorance, fear, prejudice. These ignorance and racism and prejudice and fear and greed, societies based on greed and fostering hatred, they will suffer. Lives based on this will bring suffering. But that's only the second noble truth. Then the third truth is that there is peace, that peace is possible. And that the fourth, that there's a path, there are practices of compassion and mindful, loving awareness of living with integrity, of quieting the mind and opening the heart that allow you to live in this ever-changing world with an inner freedom that no one can take from you.
There you go, Jack Kornfield on the first noble truth, I should have said. And I love it. Love that guy. A great reminder. And as always, do whatever you can to alleviate that suffering, the stress, the anxiety that is everyday life. And I offer you my prescription, which is reading, writing, exercise, and meditation. About 10, 20 minutes a piece every day. Try to do it early in the morning, and it will be a game changer. Well, at least it has been for me. Well, that is your good stuff for today. I hope to see you tonight to talk more, but because that is a real important thing for me. These hangouts are always good stuff for me. I hope to see you tonight at 8 East. All right. Well, now it's time to get to the important stuff. The news, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see. Quick hits, quick headlines. Yesterday, we found out that FBI Director Christopher Wray would not fight. He would comply. He would not resist. He would do all the things you're not supposed to do if an autocrat is about to take power. He resigned. He said he's going to resign at the end of President Biden's first term. And, of course, Trump has nominated an extremist named Kashap Patel to take over. He was in the halls of Congress yesterday, really not answering questions. Anyway, also, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is now advocating for Trump to appoint his daughter-in-law as deputy CIA director. So apparently he can get to the bottom of the assassination of his uncle, maybe? I don't know. Also, Trump nominated Kimberly Guilfoyle to be the U.S. ambassador to Greece hours after a British tabloid published photos of her fiancé with Donald Trump Jr. holding hands with another woman. So that's hilarious and weird. And I can't believe that this is the world we're living in. Yesterday, also, the House passed an almost $900 billion defense policy bill, which included a ban on gender-affirming care for transgender children of service members. So that was a real sticking point, and a lot of Democrats did not vote for it as a result. Also learned the Consumer Price Index increased 2.7% in November from a year earlier, so that's not great. The latest from South Korea, it's getting weirder. Police faced off with security officials as they sought to raid the South Korean president's office yesterday, and one of his top lieutenants attempted suicide after being arrested in a dramatic escalation of the crisis engulfing the key U.S. ally after the failed attempt to impose martial law. Let's go to Ukraine, where Russia may launch its lethal new intermediate-range ballistic missile against Ukraine soon, according to the Pentagon yesterday, as both sides wrestle for a battlefield advantage that will give them leverage in any negotiations to end the nearly 3-year war. Looks like Elon Musk has become the first person in the world to reach a net worth of $400 billion. That's right, the richest person in the world just hit an even higher rich milestone. His net worth has reached $400 billion, according to Bloomberg, making him the first person to ever cross that mark. Behind his $20 billion jump in wealth was a deal that shot up Musk's rocket SpaceX valuation to roughly $350 billion. SpaceX and its investors agreed to purchase as much as $1.25 billion of insider shares. So that's just absolutely insane amounts of money. I can't even possibly imagine when many of us are just worried about paying our bills. I saw this at Exxon, one of the richest companies in the world, fossil fuel producer Exxon, is designing a natural gas plant, apparently that has a carbon capture technology directly power its data centers. I don't like that. After a judge blocked a $25 billion merger with Kroger, the Albertsons grocery store backed out of the deal and is suing its rival now. And California firefighters have started to contain that fire that erupted in Malibu late Monday night. It's now burned nearly 4,000 acres. If you're affected by that, let me know. And in North Carolina, after cloaking a bill that strips key powers from Democrats as hurricane aid, the Republican-led legislature overrode the governor's veto to pass it. That's a really important story developing or happening in North Carolina. And the latest developments with young Luigi Mangione. Was it sex frustration? Apparently he considered bombing Manhattan. Apparently the jacket that he was wearing is flying off shelves. And the New York Police Department has issued warnings over healthcare CEO wanted posters in Manhattan. They're hanging up posters of healthcare and company CEOs and calling them wanted. So those are just some of the latest developments, but it's undeniable that we are talking about healthcare in America. Pretty much everybody is, at least for the moment. And I feel like that's a good thing. It shouldn't take the assassination of anybody, but that is the result. I think there's no denying it. We are talking about it, and we need to talk about it. So there you have it. Those are your headlines for today. Now let's get to the news clips. Clips, audio. I've always got a few of those or more for you. Let's start with Elizabeth Warren on MSNBC saying, violence is never okay, but...
Yeah. And look, we'll say it over and over. Violence is never the answer. This guy gets a trial who's allegedly killed the CEO of United Health. But you can only push people so far. And then they start to take matters into their own hands.
Yeah, that's what she's saying. She's saying it. I thought that was a little bit of an interesting thing to hear Elizabeth Warren say, but there you go. She said it. Here's a little bit more from that conversation.
Time. And that's really important. And also to remind you, it is possible to do it. And these regulatory agencies already have law. We don't have to pass new laws. We just have to get people into those places who have the courage. FTC has shown they can do it. Let's keep supporting them.
We've been talking a lot about this Luigi Mangione, the case about the United Healthcare CEO. People are very angry at United Healthcare, I think for good reason, denying care and the whole system. And we were just talking in the previous block, killing a CEO is not the way you change. You have to regulate them, right? And so we've got attempts to try to rein in some of these big businesses. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which was your creation. The Trump administration wants to get rid of it. That is like protecting people from credit card fraud. What happens if that goes away?
So look, terrible for individuals, but stop and think overall about the social contract. You know, part of the deal in how we've kept this democracy, this economy, this country on a fairly steady path for more than 200 years has been that those at the top pay a little more in taxes, are a little less rich than they otherwise might be, and everybody else at least gets a chance.
Yeah.
And what happens when you turn this into the billionaires run it all is they get the opportunity to squeeze every last penny.
Yeah.
And look, we'll say it over and over. Violence is never the answer. This guy gets a trial who's allegedly killed the CEO of United Health. But you can only push people so far. And then they start to take matters into their own hands.
Yeah.
We need regulation in part to rein those guys in. And you know where this is coming big time ahead of us is on taxes.
Yeah.
That the big boys, just like you said, their plan is to rush through this tax plan right at the beginning of 2025, give themselves a bunch more tax breaks, and then put the real burden of running this country on ordinary, hard-working
that will pay the tariff. That will pay the tariff. They're going to pay, and it's paying at the bottom.
They can pay for it in taxes.
Absolutely.
But the whole point is shove the cost somewhere else
onto the poor people
One
and make
more
them
way
subsidize
for
the rich.
billionaires to pick the pockets.
One of the billion.
All right, there you go. Elizabeth Warren explaining it as good as anybody does, and only a way that she can. Well, I mean, not only, but she does a really good job explaining that. Loved it. And how about this? Our friend Wajid Ali was on Piers Morgan's very divisive and conflict-loving television show. And they're now talking about the difference between Luigi Mangione and Daniel Penny, the double standards of vigilante justice and justice in America. And here's a little bit of that conversation, at least Waj's part.
Which I mean, there's not a massive amount of difference in response there. So is there a point here that the issue of healthcare in America is angering so many Americans because of these denial rates and so on, that this was almost an inevitable conclusion to this, that somebody at some stage was going to turn violent?
Yeah, and let me respond to Clay, your question, and also the clips. First and foremost, I for one have said that I'm against vigilante violence. I have the capacity to feel empathy for unarmed individuals who get killed. What I find fascinating about the framing is, where is the pearl clutching? Where is the outrage? It seems very selective, right? So if you're in Israel, Clay, I'm glad you're there. Talk to everyone. Go visit the West Bank and talk to Palestinians if you truly want to have empathy. When you talk about framing, right, I think Clay said, just because you're angry about a system doesn't give you the right to commit vigilante violence. I agree. Just because you're angry and you think that Donald Trump won the 2020 election that he lost, it does not give you the right to be part of an incited violent insurrection where you hurt and harm Capitol Police, take a shit in the U.S. Capitol. Some people come armed to assassinate people. By the way, just over the weekend, Donald Trump said he would pardon those people, traitors, violent insurrectionists whom he called hostages. I see no condemnation. I see celebration from the right. Another story about murder, how common it is. Another Daniel Perry, a white man, a veteran. He was convicted, Piers, just a couple of months ago. He was convicted by a jury of our peers for killing an unarmed white man who was attending a BLM rally with his black girlfriend. Governor Abbott of Texas, do you know what happened? The story no one talks about. Governor Abbott of Texas pardoned this man who was convicted by a jury for killing an unarmed white man. MAGA celebrates it. So when do we celebrate and when do we not? And right now, to go to your question, this comment that Joe said and what Brianna said and what I said is the reaction to the murder of Brian Thompson is what I'm fascinated about. It is inevitable, I believe, to answer your question directly, in a country, the most powerful, wealthy country on earth, right? That where we pay more money than any other country for healthcare, where so many people, so many adults, their number one debt, Pierce, is medical debt. I had a daughter who is a stage 4 cancer survivor. 5 years on, she's cancer free, full liver transplant. She's a little diva. A person like myself, Pierce, the only reason I had insurance is through my wife, who's a doctor. We're pretty privileged compared to most people. If I wasn't able to get help from my family and friends, I would be in debt. I would be $200,000 in debt. Pierce, I had to do a GoFundMe, and that's me, a person with relative privilege. So look at the reaction right now. And I keep telling people, for CEOs, I mean this sincerely, if you are in healthcare, if you're a billionaire, if you are a CEO, if you're a 1%, look at the bipartisan rage from Brianna to Joe Rogan about the healthcare system where, millions of Americans, Pierce, I don't think they're evil. I'm telling you, I've never seen anything like this in my life. I know deeply empathetic people who looked at this murder and said, I feel bad for Brian, but you know what? United Healthcare screwed over a lot of people.
Okay.
I have a story.
Okay.
All right, I could play hours of reactions and clips to this and talking about healthcare, and I will, or at least I'll be talking with people about it. I think I'm going to book a few next week. I keep talking about it, but I'm going to get on it today. All right, there you go, Wajid Ali. Now let's go over to the House Minority Leader. It's Hakeem Jeffries, who was on TV yesterday, scoffing at the idea that Democrats may join a new House caucus being led by Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, because, of course, the president-elect has named Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, two infamous grifters, as co-heads of an advisory committee called the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, or Doggy, depends how you want to pronounce it. The name of a nearly worthless meme coin Musk has promoted, by the way, Doge. In response, congressional Republicans formed the House, delivering on outstanding government efficiency caucus to work with the commission in some unknown capacity. Here's Hakeem Jeffries on that.
So are you recommending, by the way, your members to join the House equivalent of this committee that they want to create? It's not really a real committee. But
well, we'll have that internal discussion.
Yeah.
But as I understand it, the person charged with executing this vision is Marjorie Taylor Greene. Are you kidding me? This is not a serious effort. When you put Marjorie Taylor Greene in charge, it speaks for itself.
Yeah.
All right, I thought that was interesting. I thought this was interesting. Yesterday, the New York Times Deal Book had this major summit, and they had, there's like 9 people on this panel, all across the spectrum, including Sarah Longwell, who is a Never Trump Republican, one of the members of the Bulwark, and Kevin McCarthy, the former Speaker of the House. The fireworks were all on display during this, and, well, here it is.
Right. Even if you go to the poll and not Republican or Democrat, I think it was maybe 3 months ago, independents believe the greatest threat to democracy was Joe Biden getting reelected. And that was independents, not Republican or Democrat. So what you say, you can believe, but that's not what the American public believes.
There's a difference between what the American people think and what's true. Right. So the idea, I don't know why, I don't know what we are, why the defense of Merrick Garland, sure. Donald Trump lied about an election being stolen, and then sicked a mob on the Capitol. And it's funny that you roll your eyes at this, Kevin, because you're the one who went down and resurrected him. You want to know what happened just now in the 2024 election? Is we elected the most dangerous, criminal human being, corrupt human being that America has ever elected. And Kevin, you helped him. You're the one who went and got him after.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
you're welcome.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Okay.
And in doing so, you enabled this. And so Joe Biden, the idea that Joe Biden's Justice Department is the problem here, as opposed to Donald Trump, and the fact that he tried to overturn an election and sick people on the Capitol, is, I don't know if people let you get away with that in rooms all the time, but you should never be allowed to get away with it.
So you do realize President Trump won the popular vote.
I do.
And the American. Right.
Oh.
All right, there you go. I thought that was interesting. The whole thing is very interesting. I highly recommend it. But now it's time to get to some comedy. I probably should have gotten more clips, but hey, time is running out and I want to get this show posted. So let's go to my old friend, my old boss, Stephen Colbert at CBS's The Late Show, making fun of some of Trump's awful new appointees to run our government and our lives.
Ooh, yesterday was a big day for Trump's Secretary of Defense nominee and gym teacher who shows up uninvited to the senior pool party, Pete Hegseth. Hegseth's nomination has been in trouble after accusations of sexual assault and public drunkenness. So yesterday, he went up to Capitol Hill on a mission. CNN described it. Hegseth's focus intensifies on key women senators in weeks ahead. Speaking of women and keys, there are great things to put between your knuckles if you're approached by Pete Hegseth. Hegseth also did damage control last night on Hannity.
And I also want an opportunity here to clarify comments that have been misconstrued that I somehow don't support women in the military.
Yes, the media is so unfair. Let's hear the comments that have been so brutally twisted and misconstrued.
I'm straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles.
Okay, that sounds pretty construed to me. But in Pete's defense, that clip is from all the way back when Pete was 1 month ago. Well, Trump is picking unqualified folks for all of his top posts because this weekend we learned that his pick to lead the IRS is former Missouri congressman and star of the new CBS sitcom Principal Bullfrog. It's going to be a big hit. It's going to be a big hit. Billy Long. Long is a college dropout whose only relevant qualification is being a certified tax and business advisor, which sounds impressive until you find out that the title was granted after a 3-day training course. Long isn't just unqualified to run the IRS. Right after joining Congress, he co-sponsored a bill to abolish the IRS. Do all of Trump's nominees want to destroy the agency they're going to lead? I look forward to Secretary of Agriculture Jim Locust.
I really like that last one. There you go, Stephen Colbert Late Show on CBS. And now it's time to get to my guest. How about it? Huh? What do you think so far? We're 26, almost 30 minutes into the show and covered a lot, right? You get your good stuff, feeling good. You got your headlines and clips, and you're all informed. You know how to feel. You get all the feelings, and now it's time to get to my conversation, which is something I do every day. I invite a very interesting, articulate, thought-provoking, brilliant, sometimes hilarious person to join me. Those are just some of the adjectives I would use to describe my guests. Often they're just policy experts or authors, journalists, and scholars, people who really know their stuff, according to me, and, well, a consensus of a lot of other smart people. Today I've got one that covers a lot of those categories. My old friend, comedian Steve Hofstetter. Steve is an all-around great guy. I've known him most of my career, and we go way back, so we talk a little bit about our history together, which was really interesting, I think, part of the interview. But Steve is a monster now. I mean, he's had over 1 billion views on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. He's got a book called Ginger Kid, a top 5 pick on Amazon. He was the host and executive producer of season 1 of Laughs on the Fox Network. He's been on The Late Late Show, True Hollywood Story, Comics Unleashed, Comedy All-Stars, White Boys in the Hood, and so much more. He's been in 4 movies. He's had 2 top 20 comedy albums. He's a former columnist for Sports Illustrated, and he's also written for a whole bunch of other outlets. Currently lives in Pittsburgh with his new wife. We talk about some of the work that he's doing there to create opportunities for comedians and other artists, the inspiration of his own father, who he lost a couple of years ago, the future of America and politics, and the way that we met, which is where we start. And I really love this story, and I hope that you like this conversation. It's a little bit personal, and it's a little bit different, but I think it was really wonderful, and I was happy to catch up to my friend Steve Hofstetter. I hope that you'll go subscribe to all of his stuff, links to it in the show notes. See him live if you get the opportunity. He's constantly touring. Let's do it right now. Wow, the legend lives. That's when you know you're a big deal, because other listeners and supporters of mine have said, do you know Steve Hofstetter? He's one of my favorite comedians. I'm like, yes. As long as I've known anybody. Great to see you, my friend.
You have known me before I was anybody's favorite comedian. You've known me probably since I had been doing comedy for about 3 weeks.
Tell me about how we met and where we were at. Like, where was I at in my career at that point?
So I don't know. I just knew that I thought everybody who started before me was famous. Like, I just thought anyone who had ever had it, and at the time it was like if you had a premium blend credit or something, that's a superstar.
Yeah.
And now I realize that there were a lot of people who were on that show that didn't do anything else or similar shows. But at the time, I was just so excited. I was this wide-eyed 23-year-old kid who was excited to do stand-up. And I started out by barking for the uninitiated, that is handing out flyers in exchange for stage time.
Oof, brutal.
Very brutal, especially in the winter in New York. And a few blocks from where I went to college with the people who were still in that school.
Soul bending.
Oh my God. there was a girl
if
I had
not
a crush
breaking
on in one of my classes.
Oof.
Walked by while I was flyering, and I tried to convince, I was like, oh, it's like a collaborative thing. Everybody does it. It's like a kibbutz, you know? Just trying to not be the lowest on the totem pole.
That's rough.
But I was doing those shows. That's how I met you. And because you were on some of them. And it's fun for the listeners to know who else was. I mean, some of the other regulars were like Ed Helms, Dimitri Martin, Neil Brennan, Mark Maron. I mean, it was an incredible collection of comedy in New York. But there was a comic, Todd Lynn, who,
God rest his soul, rest in power, Todd Lynn.
Sure. And I'll explain.
Yeah.
A lot of people didn't like Todd because he didn't like anyone.
Yeah.
I had, up to that point in my life, I had never had anybody be so unnecessarily mean to me. And maybe even since. So he was, it was so utterly appalling. I was this young kid trying to produce these shows. He was on a mild sitcom. He had a small part on a mild sitcom, and so he thought he was God's gift.
He was a big New York comic at the time. He had a lot of momentum,
Yeah, but he definitely wasn't. I mean, he wasn't any of those names I just said. I mean, all of those people were already bigger than he was. And there was a show that I was producing, and I'm standing at the door trying to, as people are coming, oh, you here for the show, or you here for the bathrooms that are right there, And and it's a dark hallway. So, and he's not booked on the show. He's just walking by. And I'm like, oh, you're here for the show. And then he steps on the light and I go, oh, Todd, so sorry. You want to come in? And he got so mad at me for not knowing who he was in a dark hallway.
Right.
And so he chews me out, and I apologize, even though I had done nothing wrong. But he chews me out. It's a couple weeks later. And I didn't really know you yet. We had crossed paths, but I didn't know you. And I'm doing a show at the Old Boston Comedy Club. And I have family there to see me. Todd finds out I'm on the show and decides he wants me taken off the show.
What?
Not just that he wants to go up before me, but, oh, this kid doesn't deserve to be on this stage kind of thing. And just completely. And that was after I had apologized again and tried to make a joke about it. About, oh, hey, so sorry, blah, blah, blah. And you stepped in between us. And Todd, big dude. I'm not small. And you stepped right in between the two of us and basically, chewed out Todd and was like, hey, you don't remember when you were new? Do you want people to treat you this way? And you absolutely had my back without knowing me. I don't even think you knew my name at the time. And that moment stuck with me. I mean, obviously, it's more than 20 years later. And I still know every detail of that story because you were one of the only people in the New York scene who basically who understood that, like, the people who come in after you aren't lesser than you. They don't deserve to be hazed or anything like that. This is the next generation. And some of those same people, by the way, Nate Bargatze started at the same time as me in New York. Like, he was another Barker. And there are plenty of people who have become like household names who were of that level at the time. And people like Todd look down on us, which is why, he's dead. It's so sad.
Yeah. Wow. What a story. I do remember it to a certain extent because you wrote about it in your book and reminded me of it. So I hadn't remembered it, I don't think, before then. But it wasn't like I got in conflict every night. But Todd was a bully. And I just remember when I started out, guys were such bullies to me and tried to haze me too. And I was like, why are you doing that? Like, it's hard enough. Like, comedy is hard enough. I don't need to walk off stage and have you there telling me I suck and shouldn't be doing this. I had a comedy club owner in my hometown, actually. Syracuse, New York. The guy sat me down on stage and said, you should quit. You suck. You just bombed. I was like, in front of like hundreds of my friends.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And
I said, I just remember, pretty simple to me. Like, I never want to treat someone that way. I never want to make someone feel the way I'm feeling right now. And so I'm glad that happened. And what the great thing about it is, you and I were always friends and always looked out for each other. And nobody did a better thing for me. A lot of people did nice things for me, a lot of nice things. But you bringing me in as a regular guest on your Sirius radio show got me the gig there, which got me the other gig there and the other gig there. I mean, I wouldn't have, John McDermott, who ran the comedy department series, wouldn't know my name if not for me being a regular guest on your show. So without you, I'm glad I stood up to Todd Lynn that day.
Well, it's also...
But what does it say for other people rather than to kind of toot our own horns? The idea to me, it's like, play the long game. Be a good person. You never know when something's going to come back around. It's so easy to put somebody down. And I'm good at it. You're good at it. We're comics. But choose your battles. Don't burn bridges. But more importantly, like collaboration long term is so much better than competition in any kind of business. I've felt that way.
Well, there's 2 points I want to make. One is the reason you didn't remember that story until I told it to you was because for you, it wasn't life-changing. It was just a thing you did. And we all have things that we just do that make such a huge impact on somebody else. And you weren't doing it to curry favor. You weren't doing it. You weren't doing it out of ego. You were doing it because it was the right thing to do. And the other
because I hate bullies. I hate bullies my entire life. That's my entire yeah.
Well, I often like to tell comics when I'm trying to give young comics advice, I say, being nice to people is selfish. Be selfish. Because when you are kind to other people, that does help you. In fact, I'm not the reason you got on my show on Sirius. Eddie Ifft is. Because the reason I had that opportunity, as young as I was and as new as I was because I had booked Eddie on some shows. And one of my favorite moments in starting out was he had come over to me after a show and said, "Oh, you have really clever writing. You're really smart." And I start this verbal diarrhea about, "Oh, I've been writing for years. I've been trying to do print, blah, blah, blah." And he just stops him and he goes, "Shut up and take the compliment." Okay, sorry, sir. But he became, just like you, he became a bit of a big brother to me. And when he had a meeting with Sirius, and this is pre-Stern, this is like a few months before they signed Stern. So this was when Sirius was the upstart. And John McDermott, who you mentioned, is meeting with comics around the city. And he meets with Eddie. And Eddie volunteers my name. Eddie goes, "You know who you should really talk to? There's this kid that's really hustling. He knows a lot of people, blah, blah, blah. Recommends me. I do a pilot on the strength of that recommendation. Or I get a meeting and then do a pilot. I get the show. And then I started booking people like Eddie and you who had taken care of me earlier. But also, you were funny. You were good on the show. So it's a combination of you created the opportunity to come on the show by being a good person. But that only opened the door. You had to walk through that door with your talent also. So it was a combination of those things.
Sure. All that definitely matters. And I appreciate that. But I mean, in the end, Eddie opened the door for you. You opened the door for me. But I'm still giving you credit. But hello, Eddie. I'll share this clip.
I'll take the credit. I just, but that's my point, is that it's a whole, there's a lineage of things.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that there are people that you then helped and blah, blah. And
Eddie Ifft is also one of the good guys who helped out a lot of people. I'll share this clip with him. I'm sure he's doing really well. You were always and still are one of the hardest working people. You have had so many successes. You've had things not work out. You've done everything that you can do in this business, and you still are. You're touring all over the countries. All of next year looks like it's booked. If you get the opportunity to see Steve live, you should take it. Go to his website and see all his dates right now. He's going to be all over the place, especially out in California coming up, right? But
yeah,
I mean, how do you see what is the reason for all of your success? Because you've not only had traditional success in terms of as a stand-up, putting out albums, selling tickets, but in conjunction, you've always done really well in the world of the internet, social media. You were like, we used to make fun of you by saying you were the poor man's Dane Cook. Dane Cook was on fire, and you were doing everything he was doing. You just weren't as good looking, or, for whatever reason. But I mean, like, he did MySpace, you did MySpace, and you've always excelled at all the social media networks. You've got almost 1 million followers or more subscribers on YouTube. So what do you attribute your success to? Obviously hard work and talent, but some of it, I mean, I don't know. What is it?
I mean, part of it is a desperate fear of failure, but, that keeps me awake at night and drives me during the day. But it's really how I see the marketing end of things. As a comedian, the biggest sin in the world is to be a hack. So why is it that we're so willing to be hacks off stage? Why is it that so many comedians go, oh, the way I'm going to promote myself and the way I'm going to sell tickets is by doing something that 1,000 other people have already done? If you do something on stage that 1,000 other people have already done, you're laughed out of the business. So why not be creative when it comes to other things? One of the things we were talking about off air is you had asked, what else I want to do. And I said, I don't know yet because it doesn't exist. Because, when I started, I wasn't trying to be the king of social media. I wasn't trying to do anything like that. It was just,
you were trying to sell tickets. You were trying to sell tickets to your stand-up comedy shows.
Yes. And this is how the world changes.
So you could do stand-up comedy so that you could then do more comedy so that could be your job. And that's what everybody should have been doing. But it's always easy to make fun of the guy who works hard at marketing while the rest of it was like, people will just find me. The microphone is that loud. Like, I hate those kinds of complaints. We can all make them. That's not, we didn't get into it to be a marketing genius, but, well, it matters. It matters a lot.
But also, if you look at, so I started in 2002. The people who were big when I started were guys who were good at morning radio. That was the thing that made them. And the generation before that.
Comedians that went on as guests on a morning radio show in Cleveland or Pittsburgh or Syracuse would then sell tickets that night at that city's comedy club.
Exactly. Or the people who were like regulars on Bob and Tom or shows like that. And before that, it was people who were good at specific types of talk shows. There has always been you're a comedian, what else can you do? In order for people to know that you do stand-up.
Drywall.
What?
Drywall, plumbing.
Yeah, drywall. Well, how few Brian Regans are there who just does stand-up and made his name doing stand-up? But also, even though Brian is often held up as that comic, he also has told incredible stories about how he was trying to do this like halftime or between periods thing during a hockey game and like all kinds of crazy things that like we do the equivalent of today. And so it's just a question of, comedians only want to do stand-up. Okay. But every teacher has to grade homework. Every cop has to fill out paperwork. There are other parts of every job.
Every football player has to watch tape.
Exactly. You can't just throw. You have to study.
So let me get back to something that you said earlier, which is always interesting to kind of unpack. When you say you're motivated by fear of failure, and that's part of what gets you through every day, don't you think, have you ever had the thought that something's enough? Like, this is good enough. I'm doing well at this. I absolutely did have that at Sirius when I was at Sirius for a lot of different reasons. But I remember just thinking about people like, I don't know, Jay Leno or another comedian who you might not have heard of who never stops working. It's never enough. And I wanted a work-life balance. I have kids and all of that. And I got it and I achieved it. It was great. And I think a lot about that a lot. But I feel like for you, you've made all the money. I can't imagine that you've ever really, since you started working as hard as you did, had a really terrible time, unless you made some bad investments or something. I don't know. It seems like you've done really well and you've helped out a lot of people. You've written books, you've done albums, podcasts, everything. So is it ever enough? Why are you worried about failing?
Well, first of all, I spent a lot of money helping out other people. So I wouldn't call it a bad investment, but running a charity foundation isn't exactly a good investment. It's, just something that
what did you do? This project you started in Pittsburgh, the Steel City Arts?
Yeah. Steel City Arts Foundation. I have put $500,000 of my own money into it.
Wow.
And that is something, or $500,000 of what used to be my own money into it.
Well, what was the goal?
The goal is it's twofold. One, to help as many comedians as I can in ways that I wish people had helped me. And two, to give my father a legacy that lives on long after his death. He died almost a decade ago. And the ability to create a foundation that honors his memory and has a lot of stuff named for him, is something that I feel really strongly about. I came from nothing. And so being able to give back is important to me. But if I never advance from where I am right now, I'd be okay. That said, still need a roof over my head, still need to eat, still want to be able to travel. So I have, I'm married now. I like the idea of, I want to get out of the habit. I would love to be in a place where I didn't consider what I'm going to eat based on how much it costs on the menu. And I'm still not there yet.
How are you not there? I know. How is that possible that you're not?
$500,000 is a lot of money.
To lose, to invest.
It's not like I spent $500,000 and I had another 3 laying around. Like, I spent what I made. But it is something that if things continue how they are the rest of my life, I'll be okay.
Yeah.
Now, part of that is you got to stay relevant. You got to, you have to, your fans can't forget about you because there are so many people vying for a piece of that same pie.
Yeah.
And so I still have to work. I still have to write. Also, I am a creative person. I want to create interesting things. I never want to be, God, when I started out and when I was featuring in the Midwest for those guys who had wrote an act 20 years ago and hadn't touched a joke since. And in 2010, I saw someone doing this joke at a college conference. I saw someone doing a joke about the new band Aerosmith. And I was like, you are the most out of touch person.
It was actually Lenny Bruce.
Oh my God. It was so embarrassing. But I'm not at the point now where I can stop, but I do understand and agree with your point about how with some people, like, how the fuck is a billionaire still trying to amass money?
Well, that's the question I like to ask people. Is there a number or a lifestyle or an asset, ownership of a home or more that is enough? I always think that's an interesting question, but.
Well, I don't own my place outright. I might, in the next place I own just because of the change in the market. I don't know if I continue to sell tickets well, maybe in a couple of years I'll be there. But the reality is my goal is to be comfortable enough financially that if I have a kid, I don't have to worry about where the kid goes to school. And also to be comfortable enough financially that if I see a comedian who needs help, I can just, I would love that.
I love that about you. I didn't know that you were considering becoming a father, but that's exciting to know.
I don't know.
And
we'll see.
Don't just open a 529. It'll be fine. That's not like by the time if in 20 or 18 or 20 years when your kid's ready to go to college, I don't even think college is going to cost anything anymore.
I mean, it depends on, if this administration gets their way, then college won't exist.
Yeah, fair enough. Oh my gosh. I mean, talk to you about the world. I want to get your views on everything. You're very tuned in and everything. But just one more question. I'm interested in your lifestyle for a guy who works really hard, like me, is in a similar game, feels, you're self-employed. Let's just put us in a self-employed category so more people can relate. Yeah. You got to work or you don't make money. Do you have a lot of downtime? Do you relax? Do you take vacations?
So my wife has taught me how to, at a certain point in the day, go, all right, that was enough. And that is a huge gift she has given me because it used to be that I would check my email before bed all the time. And now comes to 7, 8 o'clock, sometimes earlier than that. I'm just like, I'm all right. If I'm home and, now it's time to go to dinner or veg out and watch TV or, whatever it is. We like to do jigsaw puzzles. We play ping pong sometimes, like just whatever it is to be present and be a person and have quality time. That kind of stuff. What?
Jigsaw puzzles.
Oh, I'm a hyper-focused person. Jigsaw puzzles.
Got it. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Especially because I have learned that edibles before bed help me sleep. And so doing that and then working on a puzzle is
the
great.
Good stuff. That's good. Good for you.
Completely lost. But I would love to be on the road less, or for her to be able to have a job where she could be on the road with me. I'd like to find that balance. And that's not somewhere I'm at yet, but it's somewhere I've gotten closer to. And it's somewhere that, now I determine my own schedule. I don't even have an agent anymore. I have enough relationships in this business and enough understanding of it that I can literally go, hey, I'd like to be in Minneapolis on this date. Here's the theater I play there. I'll shoot them an email. And I do it ahead of time so that I can plan around things. Like I know that, my wife has this Christmas tradition with her family that she loves. And so it's okay. Tell me when that is this year, and I will block it off my calendar. And I can do stuff like that.
You have always, I want to get to politics and culture now. You've always been a real thoughtful guy. I actually had the privilege of meeting your dad. I know that you were very close with him. I remember when he passed. Huh?
My dad liked you a lot, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's very nice to hear. I remember when he passed away, reaching out to you. I know it was a devastating loss for you. It continues to be, I'm sure. But, you know, what is it about him or you, or do you have thoughts? I think of you and your dad sometimes when I think of generalizing about Jewish men, because I think a lot about that Jewish men, obviously there are exceptions, but that are often humorous and not overtly masculine and curious and pursuant of education. Yeah. Now, there are exceptions, obviously, but I'm being serious. Like, your dad was a thoughtful guy and had a strong moral core. You are also a very thoughtful guy who also is very moral. Like, you're very righteous and always have been about civil rights and human rights. And go ahead and make your joke.
No, I was just laughing at the idea that you were like, I always think of you when I think of people who aren't very masculine.
I do. I think of straight men who aren't masculine, and I think of you.
Well, thank you. One of the things that my dad taught me was the idea of, you know, strength is about strength of character. And, you know, I learned about the concept of toxic masculinity before it was a concept.
How?
It was just the idea of, well, my mother was a big feminist. You know, both my parents were protesters in the 60s. It was just something I was brought up with. I remember when I was 5 years old and Geraldine Ferraro was the vice presidential candidate, it was a holiday in my house.
Huh.
It was the first major party female candidate.
Right.
And, you know, that was important to my mother especially, but to my parents. My dad, when he was in college, saw Dick Gregory. This is before the Civil Rights Act. This was 13 years before the Civil Rights. No, did I do the math on that? No, 3 years before the Civil Rights Act. My dad was out there seeking out people who were talking about that stuff. My parents adopted my sister, who's black, in 1978. And, you know, to be a white family adopting a black girl in 1978 was virtually unheard of. And it's just something I was raised with. And I don't think it necessarily has to do with Judaism, but I think that the two things that might correlate there is, one, education is very important in Judaism. You know, one of the big things you're supposed to aspire to is to be learned.
Yeah, and the Torah teaches you to question and be curious of things, right? Isn't that like a core tenet?
Yep, you're supposed to study, you're supposed to question. The other thing
Not the case at my Catholic church.
Yeah. The other thing is sense of humor is ingrained in our culture. There was one of my favorite historical figures was Rabbi Baal Shem Tov, who said, I'm paraphrasing, but when I see children laugh, that's when I see the face of God. And the idea being that producing laughter is spiritual. And not only that, but Jewish people in early America were not allowed to be in mainstream professions, and vaudeville and Hollywood were fringe. That's where the outcasts went, and we were the outcasts. And so it became something that was part of our culture.
I love that explanation, both personally and culturally or religiously. So just getting to the state of the country, I mean, and picking up off that, because I think a lot about it, how much of the cultural component of this masculinity, this tough guy, this form of Christian nationalism, the Joe Rogan effect, MMA, anti-trans, and all of that. Like, how much do you think that played a role in our election, in our culture? You're out touring the country. You're meeting all kinds of men. So I'm asking people what they think in terms of that part of it.
Well, I think it played a huge role. And it's unfortunate because I saw this, you know, in booking comedy, when you turn down someone who applies for a gig, they will either go, okay, I got to get better and I'll become undeniable. Or they go, this guy doesn't know my brilliance. I'm perfect. And when I was growing up and was involuntarily celibate, you know, I mean, I wasn't good with women at all.
You and I were involuntarily celibate together for a period of time, I believe. And there was a crossover when we both were doing comedy.
Yeah, I think that's why some people get into comedy. But I could either examine that and I could go, well, what am I doing wrong?
Mm-hmm.
There's got to be something I can learn, I can get better at, I can take better care of myself, I can treat other people better, I can become more confident. Or I could go, well, this is everyone else's fault. And that, unfortunately, is the choice that it's an easier choice. I understand why people make that choice, but it is also a stupid choice. And I do a lot of volunteering with my national fraternity. And some people see that and they go, such a progressive guy, this flies in the face of your ideals. Why would you do that? And I think it's obvious why I do that, because I think there's nothing more important right now than teaching a 19-year-old boy how to be a 20-year-old man.
Well said. Really well said. What do you think is, in the last couple of minutes we have, what is your diagnosis of the election and where America is at right now? You have great day-to-day commentary on the world of politics. You follow it very closely. You know a lot of the players well. Why do you think more people voted for him than her?
I mean, I think the reality is we're still sexist. We're still racist. I mean, as a country, there is certainly an element to that. She only had a 2-month window to campaign. I think that Democrats also have a circular firing squad. And when someone says one thing you don't agree with, suddenly they're not one of you.
Right.
And that sucks. I got so mad at the people who were saying, oh, what Kamala did as vice president, which, first of all, vice president doesn't decide, but also what the administration she was part of did when it comes to this horrific thing going on in Israel. What she did, how dare she? And then I'm like, do you see what Trump said?
Right.
Do you see, like, how can you, and, oh, well, I'm going to vote my conscience. I'm going to vote practically.
Right.
I'm going to vote pragmatically. And it was a combination of people on the right who still are unwilling to support someone who looks different than them. People on the left still unwilling to support someone who looks different than them. And also just people on the left fighting with each other about every little thing. I posted something the other day about the pardon, saying that of all the issues that, whether or not you're in favor of the pardon or not, of all the issues that Joe Biden is willing to compromise norms on, this is the one. What about Merrick Garland, and what about pushing to expand the courts and all these things we were promised, but then didn't do it because, oh, that's not the way you go about it because of the norms. And the vitriol that people came at me with.
On the left.
And I was like, you could just say, I disagree.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't have to say I disagree and also you should die.
A lot of those ones were from my accounts, my sock puppet accounts.
Fair enough. They did say not Pete Dominic. So
is that too obvious?
Yeah, it's a little, yeah. It was Deep Pominick was one of them.
Is that?
Yeah.
Pete Dominic 7? Was that a cue? I hate to let you go. I love talking to you. I'd like to talk more regularly with you on and off the air. And it was just I was talking with someone the other day and he mentioned you. And I was like, I haven't talked to Steve in a long time. And I immediately reached out to you and I was like, I'm sorry that I haven't talked to you in a long time. And you just had the nicest response, no matter how much time passes, kind of thing. So
yeah, Pete, it doesn't matter how much time passes. I will always consider you a friend.
Thanks, man. I'll talk to you soon. I really appreciate you.
All right. Take care, Pete. Thanks.
Yeah, there he goes. I told you it was personal, but hopefully it was interesting and thought-provoking and thoughtful in nature. I appreciate you listening to it. I hope to see you tonight at our Hangout. You're invited if you're a paid subscriber, that is. And even if you're not, if you really want to come and try it out and you listen to this show, you're invited. Just email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com, and say, I'd like to try the Hangout. You can lurk in the background with your camera off if you want, as long as you don't cause any trouble. I look forward to seeing you there. And at PodJam, go get your tickets now, March 27th to 30th in Vegas. Hope to see you there. Nothing like in real life, right? We're going to have a great time. I can't wait for that. Jon Carroll will be there, and here he is to play us out. each and every day. Go buy his music at joncarroll.org. And I will talk to you tonight, tomorrow, or anytime on the Discord platform, which is always available to stand-up subscribers. Be well, my friends. Love you. Bye-bye.
Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know us right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand